All right, so picture this. You're with this tech genius, right? Helped invent Wi-Fi, built companies, sold him the whole shebang. Impressive, yeah.
Sounds like it.
But then he starts flashing cash, like wads of it, bragging about how rich he is, but then makes the weirdest money choices you've ever heard.
Makes you wonder if it's all for show, huh?
Totally. And that is what Morgan Housel's book gets into, the psychology of money. This whole deep dive today is all about that book, the key takeaways.
Kind of a crash course in why we do what we do with money, even if it seems crazy from the outside.
Exactly. And Housel, he really gets at this idea that money is personal, you know? Like you and I could see the same investment and walk away totally different.
Because of our backgrounds. Our whole life experiences shape how we view risk, reward, even what enough money means to us.
Like someone who lived through the Great Depression versus someone who grew up during, I don't know, the dot-com boom. Totally different.
Totally.
Yeah.
Housel even uses John F. Kennedy as an example. His family was loaded, right? But he didn't really get the Depression, not until he read about it later at Harvard.
Sheltered upbringing, didn't experience the hardships firsthand, so his view was different.
Exactly. So think about it, right? We're always judging other people's financial moves, maybe even our own past choices.
Makes you realize maybe there's more to the story than we see on the surface. What seems nuts to us.
Could make perfect sense given their background, their context. We all have our own baggage, right?
For sure. And that actually segues perfectly into another big point Housel makes. Luck. The role of luck and risk in our financial lives.
Oh yeah, massive. He tells this story about Bill Gates. And Gates had this best friend, brilliant guy, Kent Evans.
Both had the drive, the talent, you name it. But only one became a billionaire, right?
Tragically, Evans died in a climbing accident. So it's not to take away from hard work, but it's saying there are factors beyond our control.
Like a luck variable you got to plug into the equation when looking at success or even failure.
Makes you rethink those rags to riches stories, right? Like Cornelius Vanderbilt built a whole empire.
Bending the rules to get there.
Today we call him a visionary, but back then, what if he'd gotten caught? Different story entirely.
So maybe it's not always about being a genius, but also right place, right time, and a bit of luck sprinkled on top.
It's a nuanced view, for sure.
And speaking of success, can't not talk about Warren Buffett. I mean, the guy's a legend. What does Housel say about how he got so wealthy?
It's funny, right? Skill is there, no doubt. But Hal's point is, Buffett's real secret, time. Dude's been investing for like 70 years. Compounding's had decades to work its magic.
Like if he'd retired at 60, what, he'd be a nobody?
Basically, 99.9% less wealthy, to be exact. Housel compares him to this hedge fund manager who has way higher yearly returns, but
hasn't been in the game as long, so hasn't benefited as much from compounding. It's a long game.
Exactly. Not about finding one big hit. It's those small gains, rolling and rolling for years. That's where the real money's made.
Patience, consistency. Who knew those were the keys to riches, huh?
Housel would say those are more important than trying to get rich quick.
Okay, this is all fascinating, but gotta ask, what's it all FOR, right? All this money talk, what's the point? What does Housel say about the going out?
He's clear on that one. True wealth, he says, isn't the piles of cash. It's owning your time. Doing what you want when you want, that's the real prize.
So freedom, essentially.
Exactly. He makes this point about how, look, Americans are richer than ever before, but...
Are we happier?
Nope. We trade our time for stuff, end up stressed, overworked, even with bigger paychecks.
So maybe a small amount of savings, that's like buying peace of mind. Like not freaking out if you get sick and can't work.
Or being able to wait for the right job, not just the first one that comes along. That kind of freedom is priceless.
That's a really good point. So it's not just about the money itself. It's what that money allows us to do, how it shapes our lives.
And sometimes the less we need, the freer we are. Housel's next big idea is all about that. Saving more, wanting less.
Kind of counterintuitive, right? We're always told, earn more, earn more.
He says, sure, earning more helps. But the real magic, closing the gap between your ego and your income.
Like all that keeping up with the Joneses stuff, that actually holds us back from saving.
It's like the energy crisis, right?
Yeah.
We solved it partly by finding more oil, but also by needing less energy, being more efficient.
So being humble, being content with what we have, that's actually a financial superpower.
Housel would say, absolutely. The less you need, the more you can save. Powerful stuff, right?
Definitely makes you think.
You know, it's funny, like even our understanding of simple stuff changes over time. Housel uses this example of doctors, right? Back in the day, they didn't need your consent to operate.
Hold on, seriously. They just cut people open without asking. What? That's insane.
Right. It seems crazy now. But back then, the doctor was like the ultimate authority. Patients just had to trust him.
Blind trust? Wow.
Yeah, and Housel brings up this legal case, 1931, poor guy Clarence Schlondorf. Died after surgery he never agreed to.
Oh, man, that's terrible. But I guess, like, obviously now it's like, duh, patients get a say. What changed?
People realize there's not always one right answer, especially with something as complex as, the human body.
Makes sense. Everyone's different.
Exactly. Just like with money, right? Your values, what you prioritize, your risk tolerance, all that comes into play.
Like one person might be fine with a risky surgery, another'd say absolutely not.
Same as with investments, really. What seems like a no-brainer to me might keep you up at night.
So moving away from those one-size-fits-all solutions, more towards personalized stuff, that's the trend.
Big time. Hal's point is there's no single best way to manage money. It's all about your goals, your risk tolerance, all that.
So you're saying just like you wouldn't let a doc operate without consent, you shouldn't just blindly follow any financial advice either.
Exactly. Got to think for yourself, figure out what you actually want to achieve with your money.
It's like self-awareness is a financial skill too, huh?
Huge. And it's not just about knowing what you want. Housel also talks about this tension, right? Wanting to be right versus wanting to be rich. A lot of investors struggle with that.
I can see that. We all want to be right.
Especially with money. But think about it sometimes, clinging to an investment that's tanking, that just keeps you from winning in the long run.
Stubbornness, huh?
Housel says sometimes to get rich, you got to be willing to be wrong. Learn from it, move on.
So making money is more important than always being right. Tough, but true, I guess. Like, it's better to be flexible, right? Adapt, like a bamboo bending in the wind instead of an oak that snaps.
Perfect analogy. The more adaptable you are, the better you'll navigate those market ups and downs for sure.
Which brings us to something else Housel talks about a lot, long-term thinking. That's got to be hard in our world, right? Everything's so fast-paced now.
So true. Our brains are wired to focus on, immediate stuff, what's happening NWA, not years from now.
Oh.
But with investing, that can backfire.
Like, it's that classic analogy, right? Planting a tree, you don't dig it up every day to see if it's growing.
You got to trust the process.
Same with investments, I guess. Resisting the urge to react to every little market blip, that's tough, but important.
It's about finding those returns you can stick with for years, letting that compounding do its thing.
Slow and steady wins the race, huh? Okay, but imagine you do achieve those goals, you build that long-term wealth. What does winning even look like at that point? Housel gets into that too, right?
He does. And it's not what you'd expect. It's not the fancy cars or the mansions, though those might come with it. Housel says true wealth is about having choices.
So freedom to do what you want when you want without worrying about money.
Exactly. And the funny thing is, you might not need as much as you think to get there. He and his wife, they prioritize financial independence.
What, like early retirement kind of stuff?
Not necessarily. It's more like enough to live comfortably without needing a paycheck. They even paid off their mortgage early.
Really? I've always heard, like, mortgages are good debt or something.
Yeah. You hear all sorts of stuff. But for them, owning their home outright, that's peace of mind. That's freedom. And maybe that aligns with your values, too.
So it's not just about the numbers. It's about making choices that reflect what you find important. That's interesting.
That's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
Money is a tool. It's about using that tool to build the life you want, not what someone else says you should want.
Makes sense. Okay, but hold on. We're talking about planning for the future, right? But people change. What you want at 20 might be totally different at 40. Housel addresses that too, doesn't he?
Big time. It's the end of history illusion, he calls it. We think we've got it all figured out, like this is who I am forever.
But that's never true, is it?
Nope. We're always evolving, whether we realize it or not. Housel says research even shows this. People know they've changed a lot over the past decade, but
underestimate how much they'll change in the next decade.
Exactly. So we make these grand financial plans based on who we are now, not realizing that future us might have totally different priorities.
Like planning that dream vacation, but by the time you go, your tastes have changed. Happens all the time, right?
And it can be a lot more consequential with finances.
So how do you plan for a future when you don't even know who you'll be by then?
Housel says, first, just being aware of this illusion helps. Reminding yourself, hey, future me might want totally different things.
Okay, so being open to change.
And being flexible with your plans. instead of locking yourself into rigid goals.
Like, I must retire by 40 no matter what.
Yeah, maybe aim for more adaptable stuff, like moderate savings goals, having free time built in.
Yeah.
Those are good no matter how your life changes.
More wiggle room so you can adjust as you go.
Exactly. Life throws curveballs. Financial plan's got to be able to handle that.
Makes total sense. Okay, but zooming out a bit, this whole financial world, it's complex, right? Housel gives a lot of insight into how our minds work with money. What are some of those key takeaways?
He's big on this idea that we're not always rational when it comes to money, which is kind of scary if you think about it.
Like, we think we're being logical, but
Our emotions sneak in, our biases, all this stuff we don't even realize is affecting us.
so our feelings can hijack our financial decisions.
Totally. And Housel names a few specific traps, like the narrative fallacy.
Narrative, like stories.
We love stories, right? That's how we make sense of the world. But sometimes those stories lead us astray, especially with money.
Give me an example.
Like investing in a company just because you heard this amazing story about their future, even if the numbers don't back it up.
Or, I don't know, selling all your stock because everyone's panicking and saying the market's going to crash.
Even though historically markets go up and down, it's a cycle. But in the moment, we get caught up in the story, not the facts.
That's scary but true. I've definitely made decisions based on fear, not logic, before.
We all have. So being aware of those narratives we tell ourselves, that's key.
Okay, narrative fallacy, got it. What else messes with our money minds?
Loss aversion is a big one. Basically, losing money hurts way more than gaining the same amount feels good.
Oh, I feel that. Like, losing $100 feels worse than finding $100 feels good, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense.
Oh.
And that can make us too risk averse, even when taking some risk would be good for us long term.
So afraid of losing what we have, we might miss out on growing our money.
Exactly. It's a balancing act, right? And then there's recency bias. And we put too much weight on recent events, even if they don't really reflect the big picture.
So, like, the market's been booming lately, so we assume it'll keep booming forever, even though...
Historically, that's not how it works. There are always ups and downs. But our brains tend to focus on what just happened.
Makes sense, but also dangerous if it makes us invest at the worst possible time.
Totally. So again, that long-term view is key. Don't get swayed by what happened yesterday. Focus on where you want to be years from now. Housel has some good tips for fighting these biases, by the way.
Oh, lay 'em on me. I need all the help I can get.
Well, first, writing down your investment plan. Sounds simple, but it forces you to actually think it through, not just react emotionally.
Like, what are my goals? What level of risk am I comfortable with?
Exactly. Having that plan written down can keep you on track when the market gets wild, or you're tempted to make a rash decision.
A financial roadmap? I like it. What else?
Automating. Set up automatic transfers to your investment accounts. That way you don't even have to think about it.
Savings on autopilot makes it a habit, not a choice you got to make every time. Smart.
And of course, finding good advice. But not just any advice. Find an advisor who actually gets you your goals.
Someone who's not just trying to sell you something, but who actually wants what's best for you.
Totally. Ask about their investment philosophy, how they manage risk. Make sure it aligns with your values.
So doing your research, making sure they're a good fit, not just picking someone random.
Big time.
Yeah.
And it's okay to shop around, interview a few different advisors. It's a relationship. Got to be a good one.
Makes sense. But what about advice that's not from, like, a professional advisor?
Housel's actually big on this idea of community. He believes we achieve more together than alone.
Two heads are better than one kind of thing.
Exactly. So find those like-minded people, get support, bounce ideas off each other. Maybe it's an online forum or a local investing club.
Or just like a few friends who are all trying to learn about money together.
Could be anything. The point is, you don't have to figure this all out in isolation.
That's encouraging, honestly. Sometimes personal finance feels so lonely, you know?
It doesn't have to be. And on that note of learning together, Housel's a huge advocate for learning from mistakes. Not just your own, but others' mistakes.
It's like that saying, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it, right? Applies to money too.
Big time. Housel lays out all these financial disasters, market crashes, bankruptcies, the whole shebang.
And breaks down what went wrong so we can avoid those same pitfalls.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even the smartest people mess up. And by understanding those mistakes, we can hopefully dodge them ourselves.
Okay, that's a lot to process, but really useful. So we've got planning, we've got community, we've got to be humble and learn from mistakes. But I'm sensing there's something else we haven't talked about yet that's kind of lurking in the background.
You're picking up on it, all right. It's the big L word, luck.
Ah, there it is.
So he's not saying it's all luck, right? Like hard work, smart decisions, all that doesn't matter.
Nope, not at all. He's clear that effort and skill are huge, but he also says luck plays a much bigger role than most of us want to admit.
I can see that. It's uncomfortable to think about, right? Like, maybe I'm not as in control as I thought.
Maybe not complete control, but it's about being honest, right? Luck is a factor, good or bad. Be humble when you succeed, and don't beat yourself up too much when things go wrong.
Easier said than done sometimes.
For sure. But it goes back to that long-term mindset, you know? Even when things are tough, the market's volatile, your emotions are all over the place.
You got to stay the course. Don't get rattled. Exactly. And that's where having a plan helps. Having a strategy for managing risk, which is something else Housel talks about a lot too.
Makes sense. If you don't understand the risks, you can't really make informed decisions.
He breaks it down different types of risk, how to assess them, all that. Like one of the simplest but most effective strategies, diversification.
You don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? Classic advice, but it's true.
And it applies to more than just investing, you know, your career, your skills, even your relationships. Diversify them, spread the risk.
Okay, so diversification, got it. But how much risk should we be taking? Is there like a magic formula?
Housel says it depends on your time horizon. How long are you investing for? The longer it is, the more risk you can handle.
Because you have more time to recover if things go south, right?
Exactly. If you're investing for retirement, that's decades away. You can be more aggressive than if you're saving for like a down payment in 2 years.
So young people can afford to be riskier than, say, someone nearing retirement. Interesting. But whatever your time horizon, it seems like the key takeaway is be patient.
Huge. It's like planting that tree again. You don't expect fruit overnight, right? Investing's the same. Got to let things grow, let those returns compound. Trying to get rich quick, that's how people get burned.
Patience, discipline. Not the sexiest words in finance, but maybe the most important.
Housel would say, for sure. And all of that leads to the big question, right? What are we even trying to achieve with all this? What's the point of managing your money well, building wealth? What does success even look like?
That's a deep one. I think we all struggle with that, right? Society tells us success is all about money, fancy stuff. But is that really true?
Housel's answer is no. He says, define success on your terms, not society's. What matters to you? What kind of life do you actually want?
Easier said than done, though, right? To block out all that noise telling you, gotta have this, gotta have that.
He tells a story about a guy who won the lottery, right? You'd think, instant happiness, right? But the guy ended up miserable. All that money ruined his relationships, made him isolated. He had wealth, but not the things that actually matter.
Wow, that's a powerful story. Money can't buy happiness, as they say.
Exactly. So financial success is about more than just your net worth, right? It's about your health, your relationships, having a sense of purpose.
Okay, so how do we figure out what that looks like for us? What our personal definition of success is?
Housel says, start by asking yourself some tough questions. What truly matters to you? What kind of life do you want to build?
Not the life Instagram tells you to build, but the one that actually feels good to you.
Exactly. The answer to those questions, that's your starting point.
Yeah.
Then you can use money as a tool to get there.
So money's not the goal. It's like the vehicle that gets you to the goal. Love that.
And sometimes the journey is more important than the destination.
Yeah. Especially when life throws those unexpected curveballs, which it always does. How do you plan for those moments where everything goes off the rails? Because it will, right?
Housel's got a great analogy for this. He talks about this German tank division in World War II, right? Super powerful, thought they were unstoppable, but then they got taken down by field mice.
Hold up, field mice. How do you even...
Apparently, the tanks were inactive for a while. Mice nested inside, chewed through the electrical wiring. Whole division was basically out of commission.
Okay, that's both hilarious and kind of terrifying. You just can't predict everything, can you?
Nope. And that's Housel's point. You can't anticipate every risk or challenge that life's going to throw at you.
Yeah.
Sometimes the worst stuff is what you never even considered.
So, gotta accept that uncertainty is just part of the game, no matter how much you plan.
Exactly. And the best way to handle those curveballs, build resilience. Make your financial life adaptable so when stuff hits...
You can bend, not break.
Perfect. Whether that's having an emergency fund, spreading your investments around, or just being flexible with your plans. That's how you weather the storms.
That's where that margin of safety concept comes in, right? Which Housel talks about a lot.
Big time. It's like this buffer, this cushion you build into your decisions. knowing you might be wrong sometimes.
So even the smartest people make mistakes. Having that margin of safety helps protect you when that happens.
Exactly. It can be as simple as buying a stock that's way cheaper than it should be, or keeping some cash on hand just in case.
So you're not wiped out if things go south? Makes sense.
And this is especially crucial during those crazy times, market bubbles, crashes, all that. Emotions are running high.
Everyone's freaking out. You get swept up in it too.
But if you have that margin of safety, it helps you stay calm, think clearly, avoid those panic moves that you'll regret later.
Okay, I'm getting the picture. But all of this is about managing the external stuff, right? The market, the risks, all that. What about our own heads? Our own psychology?
That's where it gets really interesting, because Housel argues we're all susceptible to these cognitive biases.
Biases, like mental shortcuts that can make us make bad choices.
Exactly. And they're sneaky, hard to spot. He gives examples like confirmation bias. We look for information that confirms what we already believe.
Even if it's wrong.
Or loss aversion, which we talked about we're so afraid to lose, it makes us make irrational choices.
So how do we protect ourselves from these biases? Seems like they're kind of hardwired in our brains.
Awareness is the first step. Just knowing these biases exist, that's half the battle.
Okay, so educate yourself.
And then challenge your own assumptions. Get diverse viewpoints, read stuff you disagree with, that kind of thing. It forces you to think more critically.
Don't just stay in your echo chamber.
Exactly. And be willing to admit you're wrong sometimes. That's hard, but important, especially with money. Housel says the best investors are intellectually humble.
They know they don't know everything and are open to learning new stuff.
Exactly. And speaking of learning new stuff, this wouldn't be a deep dive into the psychology of money without talking about compounding.
The magic word. We've touched on it, but why does Housel think compounding is so powerful? He calls it like the 8th wonder of the world or something, right?
He does. And it's simple, really, but powerful over time. It's earning returns on your returns. That initial investment, it grows, and then those gains start generating their own gains.
Like that snowball rolling downhill, yeah.
The longer it rolls, the bigger and faster it gets. Investing's the same time as your friend. The earlier you start, the more time compounding has to work its magic. But it requires patience.
Which, in our instant gratification world, is maybe the hardest part.
It's like anything worthwhile, right? It takes time, effort, consistency.
Yeah.
But the rewards can be huge. Housel's point is, stop trying to get rich quick. Focus on what you can control.
Which is?
Your savings rate, how much you're investing, the costs you're paying on those investments. Those are things you decide. Don't try to predict the market. That's a losing game.
It's like trying to control the weather, right? You can't. But you can dress appropriately for whatever comes along.
Exactly. And speaking of control, one of the biggest things we can control is how we react to the market, right? We can panic, we can get greedy, or
we can stay calm, stick to the plan, and not let our emotions run wild. Easier said than done, though, isn't it? Especially when money's involved. Fear and greed can take over.
Housel spends a lot of time on that. Fear and greed, he says, those are the driving forces behind a lot of market craziness. People make bad decisions because they're too afraid to lose or too eager to make a quick buck.
It's like everyone's looking for the easy button, but with investing, that button doesn't exist, does it?
Nope. There are principles, there are strategies, but there's no shortcuts. And Housel says the best investors, they recognize those emotional swings and don't let them dictate their actions.
So it's about having the mental toughness to stick to your plan, even when everyone around you is freaking out. I can see how that's a valuable skill, not just in investing, but in life.
Absolutely. And part of that is remembering market fluctuations are normal. Ups and downs are going to happen. It's a cycle.
So when the market takes a dip, it's not necessarily a sign to run for the hills.
Sometimes it's an opportunity. Like if you believe in a company long-term, a market dip might be the perfect time to buy more of their stock at a lower price.
So it's all about perspective, right? Seeing the bigger picture, not getting caught up in the day-to-day drama.
Exactly. Long-term view, always. That's what Housel keeps coming back to. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And to run a marathon, you need good habits.
Habits like?
Saving consistently. That's the foundation. It's not glamorous, but it's essential. Housel talks about how our culture is wired for instant gratification, so saving feels like punishment almost.
Because you're delaying that gratification, right? Instead of buying something now, you're putting that money away for later.
But Housel says, think of it as an investment in your future self. That future you will be grateful you made those smart choices today.
So it's not deprivation, it's like an act of self-care almost, taking care of future you.
Exactly. Every dollar you save now It's a seed you plant. It'll grow over time, and eventually you'll have this whole forest of financial security.
I like that imagery. But it takes time, right? And patience, which is another big theme in the book.
Huge. Patience is key for any investor. But it's tough, because we want results now, right? But Housel reminds us, the best investments often take time to mature.
Trying to get rich quick, that's a recipe for disaster, isn't it?
Usually. Patience is about trusting the process, being disciplined, and knowing that slow and steady wins the race.
Okay, so patience, got it. But how do we actually apply all of this? We need, like, a framework, right? An investment philosophy, some guiding principles to help us make good decisions.
Housel lays out a few key principles. One is value investing. It's about finding those hidden gems, the assets that are worth more than the market currently thinks they are.
Like finding a steal at a garage sale, something that's way undervalued.
Exactly. And then, of course, long-term focus. Remember that snowball. The longer you let it roll, the more powerful it becomes. Compound returns, they need time to work their magic.
Okay, long-term view, value investing. What else?
Diversification. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Spread the risk around.
Like a healthy diet, a mix of different things keeps you strong.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And most importantly, Housel says, tailor your approach to your needs and goals. What works for someone else might not work for you.
So it's about being self-aware, knowing your own risk tolerance, your time horizon, all that. But all this can feel overwhelming, especially if you're new to investing.
It can be. That's why finding a good financial advisor can be helpful. But, and this is key, find an advisor who aligns with your values, not just someone trying to sell you something.
So do your research, interview a few different advisors, make sure their philosophy matches yours.
Exactly. It's a relationship. Got to be a good fit.
This deep dive has been amazing. I feel like I've learned so much about not just money, but myself too.
That's the power of this book, right? It's not just about getting rich. It's about living a richer, more fulfilling life.
Totally. Any final wisdom to impart before we wrap up?
Remember what Housel says. There's no one right way to manage money, just what works for you. So take some time to think about what financial independence looks like in your mind. What price are you willing to pay? What risks are you okay with? Those answers, plus everything we've talked about today, that's your roadmap to mastering the psychology of money.
This has been such an incredible journey through the psychology of money. We've covered a lot of ground, but I hope our listeners have found it as valuable as I have. Remember, mastering the psychology of money isn't just about getting rich. It's about living a richer, more fulfilling life. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. So it's about taking a proactive approach, right? Making good choices where you actually can make a difference. Like you can't control the wind, but you can adjust your sails.
Love that analogy. And yeah, it's realizing even if we can't control what the market does, we can control how we react to it, right?
Instead of panicking when things go down or getting greedy when they go up.
Which, let's be honest, is easier said than done. Money does weird things to our brains. Housel talks a lot about the emotional side of investing.
He does. And this is where I think his book gets really interesting because, I mean, we've all felt it. When the market's soaring, you're like, ooh, more money. But then it crashes, and suddenly you're terrified you lose it all.
Exactly. It's like fear and greed are these two forces pulling us back and forth, right? Housel calls them out as the big drivers of a lot of market behavior. And not always good behavior either.
It's like those emotions are in the driver's seat and logic is just the passenger trying to give directions. So how do we wrestle back control? Because clearly just knowing about those emotions isn't enough.
Nope, not at all. Housel's point is the best investors, they're the ones who can stay calm and rational even when everyone else is losing their minds.
Easier said than done though, right? Like how do you develop that kind of discipline, that emotional control?
Well, first, it's accepting that market fluctuations are normal. They're going to happen. Ups and downs are just part of the cycle.
So don't freak out when things dip, because they will dip eventually.
Exactly. And remember, those dips, they can be opportunities too. Like if you believe in a company long-term, a market downturn might be the perfect time to buy more of their stock when the price is lower.
So it's all about perspective, right? Not getting caught up in the short-term panic, but seeing the bigger picture, which I think ties back into what we talked about earlier, that long-term mindset.
Absolutely. Housel says one of the biggest mistakes investors make is being too focused on the short term.
We're constantly checking our portfolios, stressing over every little change, instead of just letting things play out.
It's like you're so busy staring at the individual trees, you miss the whole forest.
Love that analogy. So zoom out, see the big picture. Got it.
And to do that well, you need good habits. Not the exciting, get-rich-quick stuff, but the boring, fundamental things like saving consistently.
Which, I'll admit, is not my strong suit. It's so hard to save when there's so much cool stuff to spend money on right now.
It is. Housel acknowledges that. Our whole culture is kind of set up for instant gratification, right? So saving feels like you're depriving yourself.
Big time.
But what if we thought about it differently? Housel says, what if instead of a sacrifice, it's an investment in your future self?
Okay, so instead of feeling bad about not buying that new gadget, I should feel good knowing I'm setting future me up for success.
Exactly. Every dollar you save now is a seed you're planting. Give it time, and it'll grow into something amazing.
I like that. Shifting the perspective, making saving feel empowering, not like punishment. But still, it takes patience, right? And that seems to be a recurring theme with Housel.
He's a big believer in patience, especially for investors. It's tough, though, because we're wired for instant results, right?
We want everything now. Fast internet, fast food, fast money.
But some things just take time. Like, think about cooking, right? You can't rush a good meal.
Gotta let those flavors develop or it'll taste awful.
Exactly. And investing is kind of similar. The best investments, they often need time to really pay off. Trying to get rich quick, that's usually a recipe for disaster.
Okay, patience, long-term thinking, I'm seeing the pattern here. But I think what a lot of people want is like a roadmap, an investment philosophy, some guiding principles to help them navigate all this. Does Housel offer that?
He does. He lays out some really solid principles. One is value investing. It's about finding those assets that are undervalued by the market, like they're worth more than people are currently paying for them.
So kind of like treasure hunting, looking for those hidden gems.
Exactly. Requires patience, research, and a bit of a contrarian streak because you're often going against the crowd. And then, of course, long-term focus. Remember that snowball analogy? Compound returns. That's where the real magic happens.
Okay. Long-term, value-focused. What else?
Diversification. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Spread your investments around different asset classes, different industries, all that.
So if one investment tanks, the others can help balance things out.
Exactly. And most importantly, tailor your approach to you, your goals, your risk tolerance, your time horizon. What works for one person might be totally wrong for another.
So knowing yourself, being honest about your needs and limitations, that's part of it too. Makes sense. But I imagine for a lot of people, this is where they get overwhelmed and think, okay, I need help. That's where a good financial advisor comes in, right?
Absolutely. But Housel stresses, find an advisor who aligns with your values and goals. Not just someone pushing products, but someone who truly wants what's best for you.
So it's like interview them, ask about their philosophy, how they manage risk, all that. Make sure you're on the same page.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to shop around. This is a big decision. It's got to be a good fit.
This whole deep dive has been amazing, honestly. We've covered so much. And it's not just about managing money. It's about managing your mindset around money, which I think is even more valuable.
That's what makes Housel's book so great, right? It's about more than just getting rich. It's about living a richer life, period.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any parting words of wisdom for our listeners before we sign off?
Remember what Housel says. There's no one right way to manage money, just what works for you. So take the time to think about what financial independence means to you. What are you willing to work for? What are your non-negotiables? Those answers, plus everything we've talked about today, that's your guide to mastering the psychology of money.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This deep dive has been a real eye-opener, and I hope our listeners have gotten a ton out of it. Remember, mastering the psychology of money, it's not just about the numbers. It's about living a better, more fulfilling life.